1, a rude awakening. We now know over 303,000 utility customers were without power.
Ice storms are beautiful to look at, but deceptively dangerous. About half of us are without power in our homes. Many roads are officially closed, and many that aren't are blocked by downed trees or wires or both. Without power, stoplights don't work, making intersections dangerous.
My folks had pictures of when I was this big of an ice storm like this, but I guess my first impression is I'm a little scared because of our big tree behind the house. We're just afraid that that's going to go on the house.
Overnight, the city took on an eerie look. Not just what you saw, but the sound of the ice and the cracking limbs. The early risers were the trailblazers. Drivers on the road before sunrise were the first to weave their way around the downed trees and under wires. The first up and at 'em were the first to see the devastation.
Oh, it looks pretty bad. It looks pretty bad. It looks like a hurricane almost. It looks almost like a hurricane.
I come from California, and boy, you got a mess out there. Trees, wires, limbs all over the place, trees falling here, trees falling. Man, I'm getting out of here.
Police were out marking the way. Power crews were beginning a job that will last for days. And city firefighters were trying to remember the last time an ice storm did all this.
One guy said 1959 was bad.
With daylight, the damage done was plain to see. Cars imprisoned by downed trees. Some cars were crushed. Yards are a mess. Curiosity seekers are out, but be warned of the hazards. Downed wires are hard to see, and branches are still falling under the weight of the ice. Even in the city, pedestrians face hazards. Watch the ice falling from Lincoln Tower this morning. It is pretty to look at, but don't be deceived. This storm packed a punch.
The ice storm froze everything in sight, ripped down trees and power lines.
This is involving 4 poles down through here, 2 out on the road here and 2 back in there.
The storm destroyed 60 of Tim Swain's 80 trees, many of which were 150 years old.
Nothing to do, act to God. You know, you take care of your place, and this happens, we'll just try to salvage what we can.
It's not easy being patient when you're cold and in the dark, but RG&E says this is a situation that demands patience. They say eventually a crew just like this one will be on your street to get you out of the dark, but that could be the end of the week. They suggest it might be wise for people to find someplace else to stay.
I don't think anybody expected anything this large.
It is the unexpected that by nightfall has turned area schools into temporary homes. Maureen Lee found all the comforts of home for herself and her 2 children after first trying to make a go of it on her own.
I tried to get the candles and everything, but we had no heat, and we got like an electrical stove, so we couldn't do anything.
Rose Del Vecchio tells a similar story.
It was freezing. It was just freezing. I was under blankets. I had 4 blankets over me. You know, it was just awful. I couldn't bear it.
At another shelter set up at Monroe Community College, those who've been hardest hit are finding what any other night they would have taken for granted, a hot meal and a warm place to sleep.
Well, I got home from work and it was really cold, and I just looked at the wife and says, that's it, pack everything up, we're going to MCC. I found out that the Red Cross has got a place for us to stay.
Keeping up with the supplies, especially the cots and blankets, has been a nonstop job for the Red Cross. These cots here are coming from Syracuse, Elmira, and as far away as Erie, Pennsylvania, and still, they are not enough.
We normally, in a disaster operation, you would set up 1, 2, 3 shelters, and we'd have more than enough cots. But we do have our neighbors to the east and to the west, and also our national organization, and that's where the 2,000 cots are coming from tomorrow.
Ham radio operators at each shelter provide the critical link for getting the supplies to those in need.
We received 15 cots. We need 18 more cots. We have a total of 33 people here right now.
And the system is working well for the hundreds who otherwise would have no other place to turn.
But those who chose
At first glance, it looked like the Wegmans we all know, but a stroll down the bread aisle told a story of short supply. There were no loaves to buy, barely any bananas, and they were fresh out of flashlights. For Janet Gaines, even life in a third world country seemed more plentiful.
The thing that gets me is I just came back from a trip to Africa, and we have less here than I had when I was in a small village near Dakar, Senegal. So it's a rather interesting contrast.
Hundreds of gallons of milk once sat here. Now this sign is the only thing with the word M-I-L-K on it. It has made people like Sean Mulvey improvise.
The coffee mate should help me, and maybe I can sneak some by the baby for breakfast tomorrow in her cereal. And that's probably preferable to using some heavy cream.
With juice for the family and juice for the flashlight, the Reverend Enoch Smith and son Ian were ready to head home. The trip through the store was the easy part. Getting here required some doing.
I have a CB radio, so I asked somebody over the radio where was Wegmans open, and they gave me the location. So we drove from Gates to here to get the items we needed for.
Needs are a relative thing. Just ask twins, Melinda and Marianne, with a quarter keg of beer and a bag of Doritos.
Well, we live off campus, and our heat and our electricity's off, so we're going to campus to party and spend the night.
See, it doesn't have to be all that bad. For Melinda and Marianne, this shopping trip fit the bill.
This entire neighborhood has been kept in the dark. The storm that ripped through the area knocked power out and has yet to be restored. The McIntyres are getting by the best way they can.
We've been burning our candles, heating with a kerosene heater, doing coffee in a saucepan.
But in the Strawberry Hill neighborhood, some of the residents are beginning to see the light, thanks to their neighbors. You see, half of the street has electricity. The other half is still without it. So the side with lights runs an electric cord from their homes to the neighbors across the street who don't have power.
At least we have the freezer and we have the sump pump running, and we're not losing the food, and the basement isn't flooding, and the people across the street, the Perez's, have just been fantastic. I can't say enough.
Him and his two sons were in the basement trying to get all the water out of the basement. So then my wife says, well, why don't we just hook up and try to help them out.
Isn't this adding to your bill?
Yeah, sure it is. But what are neighbors for?
And now the act of neighborliness has spread. In fact, several neighbors in the division are stringing cords across the road.
Since the rain and the snow has slowed down and stuff, we haven't used the sump pump, we use the light.
What's going on in this neighborhood?
Well, we just all kind of help each other the best we can.
Under the glow of a Coleman lantern, Bob Fess pedals for power. By pedaling his exercise bike, Bob fuels the electric fan that distributes gas heat throughout his house. It's an idea he picked up at a science fair.
And I thought, someday I'm going to do it. And then I just put it on the back burner like you do some of them, and now the occasion really came up.
The occasion was the ice storm that robbed his neighborhood of power. But the mindset for coming up with the invention was always there.
I'm clever. Let's put it that way. I look at a can opener and I'd say, well, I can use that for something rather than a can opener. And I'm very good at stealing other people's ideas, too, you know.
Bob pedals for about 2 hours a day, but the exercise is no sweat for him. He is 61 years old and in fine shape. The important thing is staying warm.
All I know is it enables me to stay in my home, and there's nothing like sleeping in your own bed.
As we face
Their Winnebago is the only way they can stay warm. Their house, like many others, doesn't have any heat.
It started out being fun, then it was different. All that's gone.
It was a challenge.
Now we're down to reality. Let's get it all back.
But until that happens, the Camerons are enjoying some of the comforts of home.
How come?
They watch their battery-operated television, get snacks out of the camper's refrigerator, and relax in relative warmth.
It's something new to me. I'm not used to it, but it's been better than living in the house.
Staying with the Camerons is this German exchange student who, believe it or not, is finding humor in the whole situation.
I mean, it's funny to see the American people without their comfort, without their TV and everything.
Meantime, a drive through the neighborhood shows an eerily darkened street where behind closed doors, people are trying to stay warm on this bitter cold night. In one of the houses, a family huddles in one room around a tiny space heater fueled by their generator. How about keeping warm? How you doing that?
We haven't. The old-fashioned way. Hug a lot. A lot of clothes.
This family is facing a grim situation with a sense of humor. As they say, things could be worse. At least they've got each other.
Gerald Beckins is a farmer who is proud of the sour cherry trees he planted 20 years ago. But since the ice storm hit, a large part of his farming history has been destroyed.
I came out of the house the first thing in the morning. I stood on my back porch, and I just could hear crash, crash, crash. Constantly, trees tumbling.
Constant crashing that wiped out 50% of his sour cherry trees.
I feel like somebody took 20 years out from under me. So it's kind of choking at times, because at my age, if I plant them to get them back here, I'm going to be an old man.
At the Beckins farm, the past several years have been a tough market for cherries, and now tough decisions are being made as to whether the Beckins farm can continue.
There's no insurance on this particular part. It's we can get crop insurance, but not tree insurance, and this is going to be 100% total loss to me.
It is the older, more productive trees that were destroyed from the ice storm, and for Gerald Beckins, that is a loss of 5,000 trees and $200,000. Almost 1 week after the storm, the sun is shining through the split trees and fallen branches, giving an even clearer picture of the devastation.
Familiar phrases always seem to surface in a crisis. The best of times, the worst of times. For every cloud, there's a silver lining. You know them all. And yet, above and beneath the ice that immobilized the greater Rochester area last week, there was and still is some beauty to be found. Families without TV and light playing parlor games. Relatives brought together in a common house with heat or phone service. Once we adjusted, newfound courtesies on the road as we learned to let the other guy proceed through the intersection. Neighbors who hardly talk may be together tonight as they shared generators to run sump pumps and furnaces. One neighbor who got power back came to my door to offer to let me plug in with an extension cord. Thousands are still without power tonight, 1 week later. But as the crisis continues, we can look back beneath the coating of ice that first day. It was then we found an inner beauty in people that we never saw before, or perhaps never looked for. And above the destruction, the surface of the ice provided beauty as well. Crystal beauty. Beauty recalled by the words of poet Robert Frost. We share that beauty through the lenses of photographers Steve Hayes and Paul DePascal as we bid you a pleasant and hopefully warm good night. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice on a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen.
Bye.